Her hand was cold, but her strength was brutal. I was standing in the middle of the room, a wine glass trembling between my fingers, when I felt that pressure on my arm. The party lights were flashing red and blue. The music was still playing loudly, but my mother-in-law's gaze was what paralyzed me most. She didn't smile. She just repeated, "Don't look back." I froze. That wasn't a request. It was an order, and something inside me, something almost instinctive, told me to obey. But how could I not look? How could I not turn my head when the entire room behind me seemed frozen in time? It felt as if the air had grown denser, an invisible silence, cutting through the sound of the music, just for me. Share this story to reach further, subscribe to the channel, share this video on WhatsApp, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I'll be very happy to read each comment. I didn't think a family celebration would end like this. I didn't think a simple gesture could hide so much, but now I understand. Now it all makes sense, and you will understand too. This story begins on a seemingly ordinary afternoon, but in just a few minutes, everything you think you know about family, trust, and fear will change. Get ready. The party was a typical American affair, held in the backyard of my mother-in-law's house in an upscale area of Connecticut. Hanging lanterns, soft music, crystal glasses, and well-dressed people chatting as if nothing could go wrong. I felt out of place, but I tried to smile. It was my husband's birthday. I had to be there. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, was the center of everything. Always impeccable, always in control. She watched me constantly, even when smiling at the guests. Those cold blue eyes missed no detail. And that day, she seemed more tense than usual. There was something strange about her. In her gestures, in her way of speaking. My husband David moved among the guests with his polite, political manner. He was a lawyer at a major firm and knew how to carry himself. But there was a nervousness about him too, one I couldn't ignore. Something was off. Something was about to happen, and everyone seemed to sense it, except me. I went to the kitchen to get more ice and heard whispers. 2 aunts were talking quietly, looking worried. When they saw me, they immediately fell silent. I felt the weight of their gaze. I walked back to the backyard with my heart racing, trying to convince myself it was just paranoia. But that night no longer seemed ordinary. When I returned, Evelyn was already waiting for me. She was standing alone near the cake table, holding a glass of champagne. She beckoned me with a slow, almost ceremonial gesture, and I went, unaware that, at that moment, I was already walking into a trap. "Stay close to me," she said bluntly. "And when I tell you not to look, you just don't look. Got it?" I laughed, confused, thinking it was another one of her control games. But she didn't laugh. Her gaze was more serious than ever. Was that fear I saw? It made me uneasy. "Evelyn, what's going on?" I asked, but she looked away and said it wasn't the time. She asked me to trust her, as if she were my mother. But the truth is, there's never been much affection between us. I've always been the infiltrator in the perfect family. And now she's asking for my trust with a squeeze. I returned to the party, trying to maintain normalcy. But the guests were changing. I began to notice dark expressions, sidelong glances, and whispers that stopped as I passed. The feeling that something was about to happen was suffocating, and it only grew worse with each passing minute. Out of nowhere, the garden light began to flicker. David went to the power panel but didn't return. Evelyn, who was beside me, gripped my arm tightly and said, "Don't look back. Not now." My breath caught. Behind me, I heard a dull thud, like something falling to the ground. My reflex was to turn around, but she tightened her grip on my arm. "Do you trust me?" she said, her voice low and grave. I didn't, but something told me that if I looked, something would change forever, and not for the better. At that moment, a million things ran through my mind. I remembered the day I met Evelyn. It was Christmas, 5 years ago. She analyzed me like someone examining a defective part. She never said outright that she hated me, but she never tried to hide it either. She had always owned the narrative. She manipulated everything around her. Who spoke to whom? Who knew what? Who could be in her presence? A queen in a castle she built herself. And now, this queen was afraid. This was new. This was terrifying. I remembered one day when I overheard a fight between her and David. She said that the secret had to be kept, that no one can know what happened that night. David was crying. I pretended not to hear. I thought it was family drama. But now, everything seemed connected. I also remembered an old photo album she'd hidden when I'd accidentally entered her room. An old album with torn photos, dates covered in black ink, family members. No one mentions anymore. Why did that past cause such panic? I took a deep breath and came back to the present. Evelyn was still holding my arm. The sound behind me had stopped, but something told me that if I turned around, my life might never be the same again. I needed to decide, and fast. I didn't see anything, but I felt it. It was as if the air behind me was charged, different, as if someone were there, as if something was watching me. Evelyn's eyes were fixed on mine. "Don't look," she repeated, almost pleading. "If you look, you'll attract it. It wants to be seen." Him. That word chilled my blood. Who was him? And what did that have to do with me? I began to tremble. My whole body wanted to flee, but my legs wouldn't obey. It was as if I were trapped in an invisible web, being watched by something I didn't understand. Other guests began to back away, as if they knew, as if they'd been waiting for this to happen. No one came to help me. No one asked if I was okay. It was as if everyone already knew what was happening, except me. Evelyn pulled me into the house. She slammed the door behind us. "Don't say anything, and don't go into his room." She was crying now, and seeing that cold, haughty, vulnerable woman like that scared me more than anything. Something truly serious was happening. "He always comes back on his birthday," she whispered. "You have to trust me, for your life." And for the first time, I saw, deep in her eyes, an old regret, something she'd tried to hide for years. But now, it was about to swallow us both whole. As Evelyn locked all the doors in the house with trembling hands, I followed her like a frightened child. She talked to herself, reciting what seemed like memorized phrases, like prayers or rituals. "He only enters if he's seen. He only enters if he's seen." The sounds of the party were still outside, but everything inside seemed frozen in time. We went to the end of the hallway, and there was the door, David's old room, where, according to Evelyn, no one was allowed to enter. A dry, enigmatic warning. "If you hear voices, don't answer." Fear began to eat away at me from the inside out. What was in that room? Why was she so afraid of something that should have been locked away for years? I wondered if she was trying to scare me, if this was all part of some sick act. But the truth was, she was no longer in control. Evelyn was overcome with dread, and there was something real in that fear that infected me. Her eyes were red, her breathing ragged, and her voice cracked. She was no longer the powerful matriarch she once was. She was a broken woman, trying to hold on to a secret with her last ounce of strength. "You don't understand why he hasn't come for you yet." She said this, staring at the bedroom doorknob, as if afraid it would move on its own. "He shows up when he senses someone new is in the family. He always shows up, in the 5th year." And that's when my head spun. David and I had been married for exactly 5 years. Was that a coincidence? Or was it the expiration date of normalcy Evelyn had mentioned earlier? The house was silent now, and the tension was sharp as a knife. I began to think of everything that could be locked inside. Some letter, a cursed memory, perhaps a person they'd hidden from the world. Evelyn sensed my thoughts and shouted, "Don't think about it! Thinking is the first invitation." This paralyzed me. The level of madness, or truth, of it all, surpassed anything I could have imagined. And the scariest thing was that, even without fully believing it, a part of me was beginning to feel something, as if a presence were hovering over me, even without revealing itself. I took 2 steps toward the door. Evelyn fell to her knees and cried, begging me not to touch it. "He feeds on doubt. That's why he always comes back when someone starts questioning." And I was questioning everything. My marriage, my mother-in-law, my own sanity. The bedroom doorknob was covered in dust, but something about it felt warm, like it had been recently touched. I pressed my ear to the wood. Nothing. But then, barely audible, breathing, slow, steady, behind the door. At that moment, Evelyn pulled me back with a strength I hadn't known she still possessed. She hugged me like someone trying to save someone from an abyss. "You can still get out of this, but you have to choose now. Either you forget what you heard and go back to the party, or you open that door, and he'll never stop following you." I trembled. It was as if my life was divided in that dark hallway, before an ordinary door with an invisible horror behind it. I ran back to the backyard, searching for David among the guests, but he was gone. The garden light continued to flicker, now irregularly, as if the house were losing power. No one seemed to notice. It was as if they were trapped in a bubble of manufactured normality. I called out to him. No answer. I grabbed my cell phone. No signal. Evelyn appeared behind me and said with terrifying calm, "If he went to the bedroom, it's already too late." I ran to the back of the house where the basement was. The door was ajar. The same strange smell, something between metal and rotting wood, was felt in my nostrils. I went inside. The floor creaked beneath my feet. The walls, covered with old family photos, seemed to be watching me. And down at the bottom of the stairs, I heard his voice. Love? It was David's voice. But something about it wasn't right. It was as if he were imitating his own voice. I descended slowly, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. Deep in the basement, I saw a figure. It was David, or it seemed so, but his face was partially shadowed, his body rigid, as if he were waiting. "You looked, didn't you?" he asked. And in that moment, the tone of his voice was no longer his. It was low, deep, as if speaking from inside a well. "You opened the way for me." I stumbled back up the stairs, banging on the steps, trying not to scream. Evelyn was waiting for me at the door, her face pale, almost transparent. "If he talked to you, then it's already started." And without another word, she handed me a wooden box. "This is what's left from the first time." I opened the box and found a doll, burnt, eyes sewn shut, a tag with the name Emily sewn onto the chest. My daughter. No one talks about her, because no one remembers her. Only him. The truth hit me like a blow. Evelyn had lost a daughter, and now this he wanted my husband. And if he didn't take him, maybe he would take me. She said the presence always returns when she senses the pain still lingering in the house. You love too much, and that's what attracts him. The more love, the more he wants to destroy. In that moment I understood. I couldn't save David alone, but maybe I could stop him from becoming part of it. I went to the living room, took a deep breath, and sat on the floor. If it's going to end, it's going to end with me conscious, I thought. Evelyn sat beside me. "So you chose to fight?" She opened an old book with strange symbols and began to read. The house shivered slightly. The temperature dropped. The clock stopped. And the bedroom door opened. By itself. The bedroom door opened with a sharp click, as if it had been waiting for this moment for years. The wood creaked slowly, revealing a room where time seemed to have stood still. Everything was dusty, covered in a gray veil that gave the scene the appearance of a domestic cemetery. In the center of the room, a rocking chair, and in it, something. I can't quite put my finger on it. It was like a shadow denser than the others, motionless, yet absurdly present. The room, somehow, pulsed. Evelyn didn't come in. She stood in the doorway, reciting words I didn't recognize. Her eyes were closed, but tears streamed down her face as if she were reliving some ancient trauma. I entered, even though my legs were trembling. Each step seemed heavier than the last. The air inside was thicker, colder. I approached the chair, and when I was just a few inches away, the shadow rose. It had no face, not like ours, but its contours mimicked a human body, and even without eyes, I knew it was staring at me. "Why did you come back?" the shadow said. It was David's voice, but at the same time, it was Evelyn's voice, and Emily's, all overlapping, creating a sound that seemed to vibrate inside my skull. "You opened it. Now it's too late." I screamed for David. I begged him to speak to me, but the shadow merely inclined its head. And in that simple gesture, I realized something even more terrifying. Part of its face was his, as if the entity was slowly absorbing him. I ran to the chair and screamed, begging David to answer me, and for a second, I heard it. "Love, don't look." But it was too late. I was already staring directly at the entity. The pain in my head was immediate, as if something was trying to penetrate my vision. Evelyn screamed, pulling me back. "You can't see it for long. It shapes itself based on what you love." The shadow began to grow. The walls shook. The house groaned as if it were alive. Evelyn pushed an antique mirror against the door. "He hates reflections. They show what he truly is." The shadow screamed, a sound like 1,000 distorted voices. Its form began to melt, like wax in a fire. And there, in the center of the dark mass, for a second, I saw David, trapped, his eyes closed, his skin pale. It was as if he were in a trance. If you want to save him, you must make a choice. Either you enter for good, or you close the door forever. I stood there, torn between love and terror. Evelyn handed me an ancient dagger, with symbols glowing red. "Either you cut the bond now, or you lose yourself with it." The shadow approached. It held out its arms as if inviting me into something eternal, and I knew that either decision would come at a steep price. My entire body trembled. The blade in my hand felt alive, pulsing with a heat that contrasted with the cold around me. The entity stopped a few feet away, waiting. It didn't advance. It wanted me to choose. It wanted it to be my decision. Evelyn continued chanting, but her voice was almost a whisper, weak, almost fading. "He wants you to choose love, because that's what makes him stronger," she said breathlessly. "But it's also the only thing that can hurt him." I looked back at the entity. I saw David inside, trapped, nearly unconscious. If I left him there, I might be able to close the door forever. But could I live with that? Could I face life knowing I'd abandoned the man I love? Doubt was a paralyzing poison. But the entity sensed it. It fed on it. Every second of hesitation strengthened it. Its arms darkened further, stretching as if to envelop me completely. I lowered my head. And in that moment, I remembered something David had told me on our honeymoon. If I ever lose myself, only your love will bring me back. That gave me strength. I raised the dagger, not to strike, but to cut. I cut my own arm, creating a blood bond with the blade. Evelyn screamed, begging me to stop, but it was too late. The entity flinched, as if something was burning inside. "You are breaking the cycle," she whispered in a deep voice. "This has never happened before." I ran to David. I touched his face. He opened his eyes. They were empty, but a tear fell. "I'm here. Come back to me. I love you, David." The entity began to tremble. The walls shattered. The entire room was collapsing. Evelyn pulled the mirror back. The shadow screamed. The entire house shook. I hugged David with all my strength, and in the next moment, everything was light. I woke up in the garden, surrounded by shocked guests. The house behind me was intact, but the door to the old bedroom was gone. Evelyn was beside me, her eyes closed, and David, still in my arms, was breathing deeply, as if I'd woken from an endless nightmare. "You found me," he whispered, and I cried like I'd never cried before, because in that moment, I knew we'd won, but I also knew the price would still be exacted. The entity doesn't disappear. It just changes form, and hides until someone new loves too much again. Evelyn looked at me with a sad smile. "You achieved what I couldn't. You saved someone." But deep in her eyes, I saw it. The fear still lived there, because the cycle may have been broken, but not destroyed. For the next few days, the house fell into absolute silence. Evelyn didn't say much, but her eyes spoke volumes. There was a mixture of relief and guilt on her face, as if saving David had brought to the surface wounds she thought had been buried forever. The bedroom door truly disappeared. Not physically, it simply ceased to exist. Visitors would ask, "Has this part of the house always been like this?" And even we, who knew what had happened, began to doubt our own memories. David was alive, but different. He didn't remember everything. He claimed to have dreamed of a dark place where time didn't exist, and where voices told stories he never lived. Evelyn avoided any discussion of the matter, but I needed to understand. I returned to that wooden box. Inside, besides the burned doll, I found letters, handwritten, dated, from unknown senders. They were all addressed to Evelyn, and they all talked about Emily. There was her name again, the forgotten daughter, the erased daughter. One letter in particular gave me chills. "You can hide the pictures, burn the clothes, and erase the name, but as long as love doesn't die, it returns." I realized the entity wasn't just a spirit or a curse. It was a cycle, an emotional parasite that fed on guilt, pain, and silence. And in that family silence, it always found a home. Evelyn created a cemetery of memories within her own home. I confronted Evelyn. I asked who Emily's father was. She hesitated, then broke down. It wasn't David. Emily was another man's daughter, a man I tried to erase from history, a man who disappeared just the same. She trembled. I saw what he became, and I let him, because I thought his love was weak, but yours was too strong. It destroyed me, realizing she had sacrificed someone out of fear, and that the cycle had fed on this for decades. Evelyn gave me the last secret, a key, small, rusty, hidden inside a fake jewelry box. "This opens the real basement, the old one, the one sealed off before the house was renovated." And then it all clicked. The basement we knew wasn't the original. The real one had been sealed off, along with what was left of the first host. "If you really want to end this, you need to go down there and see what's left." That night, I waited for David to fall asleep. I grabbed the key and went down to the basement. Behind the bookshelf, a false panel, and behind it, the lock. The key turned with difficulty. The smell that came from there was indescribable. as if time had died inside. I grabbed a flashlight. I took a deep breath and went in. The floor was packed earth, damp, as if it had never seen daylight. The ceiling was low, and roots crept through the walls, as if nature itself had tried to swallow the place. With each step, my breathing grew heavier. It wasn't just the stale air. It was as if the darkness itself held weight. My hands trembled. The flashlight gave me little light. And just ahead, I saw something covered in an old sheet, soaked with mold. I pulled back the fabric. It was a broken wooden chair, and beside it, chains attached to the floor. The horror grew slowly. Nail marks on the walls, fragments of children's clothing, and in the background, an entire wall covered in words scratched in blood. Names, dates, drawings of eyes, an altar built of small bones, almost too fragile to be human. But what frightened me most was the message written in the center. She saw, and he stayed. Pain exploded in my chest. This wasn't just a hiding place. It was a prison, a sanctuary, a mausoleum of emotional pain where the entity had been created, nurtured, and multiplied. It wasn't an ordinary spirit. It was the reflection of family trauma, of denial, of what no one wanted to remember. Evelyn not only knew this, but tried to isolate it, control it, dominate it, and failed. Now, I was here, face to face with the origin of it all, and for the first time, I understood that this couldn't be defeated with a knife or a mirror, only with the truth. The flashlight flickered. The air turned frigid. And then, she appeared. Emily, or something wearing her face. Her eyes were stitched shut, but her mouth smiled. "Do you want to let go, or forget?" Her voice wasn't coming from her mouth. It was coming from the wall, the floor, from inside me. I tried to answer, but my throat went dry. She held out her hands. "If you want him to live, you need to die a little." In that instant, I understood. The love that bound me to David was now the anchor keeping the entity trapped here, and she wanted to bargain. I could leave, pretend nothing existed, close the panel, hide the key, and live as before. Or I could do the unthinkable, give up something of mine, a memory, a piece of my love, and I knew which one. Emily wanted the memory of the day I met David. I wanted to erase the beginning, so the cycle would lose its power. "If you forget where it began, it will never find its end." I cried, but I accepted it. I closed my eyes and let the memory go. I woke up in my room. David was looking at me, smiling. "Are you okay?" I smiled back, but something was off. He was beautiful, sweet, caring, but a part of me no longer knew how it all began, and this silent pain, this emptiness, was the price. Evelyn appeared in the doorway. "You did what I never could. Now, maybe he won't come back." But deep down I knew. The cycle had weakened, but it hadn't died, because as long as there was love, there would be something trying to feed on it. Over the next few days, I noticed strange things. David would come home from work late, his clothes smelling of damp wood. Sometimes he'd talk in his sleep and repeat the name Emily in a voice that wasn't his own. He'd wake up sweaty, confused, and unable to remember. The cycle wasn't over. He was trying to get back in another way. Inside David, I went to Evelyn, but she was growing weaker by the day. The entity didn't leave. It just changed form. Now it's trying to become part of him, very slowly. She handed him an envelope with a single sentence. "Love is the door, but silence is the key." I returned home, not understanding, but I soon realized, every time I ignored the signs, David's condition worsened. One night, I found a drawing in his pants pocket. It was the same doll from the box, with eyes sewn shut. "Did you draw this?" I asked. He said no, but his eyes were distant. The entity was playing hide-and-seek and winning. If I wanted to truly save him, I would have to face what was left, for the last time. In the living room, I hung Evelyn's antique mirror, the only object she claimed held the truth. I sat David before it, silent. He resisted, but he looked. And what we saw there wasn't him. It was the shadow, growing behind, like a dark copy, with the same eyes, but empty. "She wants me to be him now," David murmured. The mirror cracked. The energy in the house shifted. It was there, with us, stronger than ever. I grabbed the dagger. Evelyn appeared in the doorway, panting. "He needs to choose." I looked into David's eyes. "Fight me." He wept. He touched my hand and looked back into the mirror. "I'm not his," he whispered. The shadow screamed. With a final scream, the mirror shattered completely. A gale swept through the house. The lights went out. When they came back on, the mirror was empty. David was slumped, but breathing. The presence was gone. This time, by his choice, the cycle broke from within, and that finally freed the house. The house is quiet now. Evelyn moved out the following month. She said she needed to get away from that floor, that mirror, from everything she'd tried to control for so many years. David has improved, but not completely. Sometimes he gets lost in thought and looks into the corners of the house as if someone were there, and I feel it too. Something remains, maybe a trace, maybe just fear. We never spoke of Emily again, or of him, not because we forgot, but because we know that names give form, that words open doors, and that silence sometimes is the only possible lock. The broken mirror is still in the basement. I never had the courage to throw it away. Because deep down, if something tries to come back, I want to be ready, to look it in the eye, and fight again. But what scares me most isn't the possibility of him coming back. It's the certainty that there are other homes, other families, other loves as deep as ours. And he feels, he searches, and when he finds, he waits for the right time. So, when someone tells you, don't look back, obey, not because they are protecting you from something, but because it is already late. Today, when I walk down that hallway, I still feel a shiver, but not of fear, of respect, for the pain that passed, for the love that survived, for the shadow that almost took it all away, and for myself, because I looked, I faced, and I chose to live. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel, share it on WhatsApp with someone who needs to hear it, and comment where you're listening from. Your presence here is what keeps me telling hidden truths like this. Thank you for listening. And don't forget,